chance tonight to watch it. It was just, well, tears were just, it was Starry, Starry Night was the music. Just gorgeous. So pretty.
Mr. Mayor, it is 5:30 p.m. and the live stream has commenced. You may begin your meeting.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I see that we have quorum this afternoon. We also are being joined by Councillor Wink and Deputy Mayor Eckert on Zoom. So I bid a good afternoon to senior management, to our residents. And like I say, we have quorum, so I call this public meeting under the Planning Act into session on Wednesday, February 11th at 5:30 p.m. Up first on today's agenda is the land recognition statement, and it will be read tonight by Councillor Hildebrand. Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The town of Pelham is situated on treaty land, steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of First Credit First Nation. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island live and work in Niagara. The town of Pelham stands in solidarity with all Indigenous peoples, past and present, acknowledging that our high standard of living is the result of the resources and lasting friendship of Indigenous people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I now will turn to the clerk for opening presentations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Public meeting under the Planning Act of Wednesday, February 11th, 2026 at 5:30 p.m. This public meeting under the Planning Act is being held in a hybrid format, allowing for both in-person attendance and remote participation where requested. It is important to note that no decisions have been made in advance of this meeting, and none will be made this evening. The purpose of the meeting is to provide information and receive input from council and the public. The Planning Department will present details regarding the subject application. Following the presentation, members of the public will have an opportunity to provide verbal submissions. Please note that no answers will be provided to questions raised during the public portion of today's meeting. Council and the Planning Department will receive and consider all verbal submissions, as well as any written submissions received prior to or following this meeting. Questions or comments may be addressed by the Planning Department through the recommendation report, which will be brought forward to Council at a future meeting. Public meetings under the Planning Act are formal proceedings and require proper decorum. This means that all comments are to be made through the chair. If you have pre-registered to speak, either virtually or in person, you will be provided an opportunity to address the committee at the public portion of the meeting. Each speaker will be provided up to 10 minutes and may address the committee only once at the podium. If a previous speaker has already expressed the same comments, repetition is not necessary. Please keep all remarks concise and relevant to the matter before the committee. Inappropriate comments or behavior, including clapping or interruptions, will not be tolerated. And if decorum is lost at any point during the meeting may be recessed and individuals may be asked to leave. If you wish to provide additional comments for the Planning Department's review prior to preparation of the recommendation report, or if you would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the planner responsible for the application in writing as soon as possible. Contact information is on the screen and will follow their presentation as well. Mr. Mayor, that brings us to the adoption of the agenda, and I have a motion moved by Councillor Hildebrand that the agenda for the February 11th, 2026 public meeting under the Planning Act, special meeting of Committee of the Whole, be adopted as circulated. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. After viewing the agenda, any council member have any questions or comments on it? Not seeing any, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? I see none opposed. Motion carries.
Thank you, and that brings us to number 5, disclosure of pecuniary interests.
Thank you. And councillors, after reading the agenda, does any council member have a pecuniary interest and general nature thereof to declare? And Madam Clerk, I see none.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will note that. And we are now on item 6, and I will read the introductory remarks. Town of Pelham Additional Residential Unit Bylaw Amendment, file number AM01-2026. The Planning Act requires under Section 34 that Council must hold at least one public meeting to inform the public about the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. This public meeting has been called to satisfy this request. this requirement. Notice of this statutory public meeting was published on January 23rd, 2026 on the town's website under both the public notices section and the specific project page. It is also posted to the town's social media platforms and posted on the Voice of Pelham's website at Pelham Today. Additionally, a copy of the notice was emailed to all relevant commenting agencies, as well as all interested stakeholders who had provided contact information through direct contact with the Planning Department. In addition to providing information, we will also receive any comments from members of the public. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the planner responsible for the file as soon as possible. Contact information again will be displayed on the town's presentation. Appeal rights for this proposed amendment may be limited under the Planning Act. To those who would otherwise have the ability to appeal the decision of the Town of Pelham to the Ontario Land Tribunal, they must make oral submissions at the public meeting or written submissions to the Town of Pelham before the bylaw is passed. Failure to do so will result in the loss of the right to appeal the decision. In closing, we emphasize that at this stage, no decisions have been made regarding the proposed amendments, and therefore, any comments will be received and considered by Council. To you, Mr. Mayor, we are joined by Lindsay Richardson, Policy Planner, this evening.
Thank you. Ms. Richardson, you have the floor.
Turn that bad boy on. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening to you and the rest of council and my colleagues and members of the public. Tonight we are here to discuss an amendment to the zoning bylaw in relation to additional residential units. So as I think everyone here knows, our current zoning bylaw was approved in April of 2023, and it does apply to all lands in the town of Pelham, save and except those that are under appeal currently. Since the bylaw's approval in 2022, there have been additional provincial policy changes that impact the current ARU regulations. And the purpose of this zoning amendment process is to review the current regulations within the context of new provincial policy and legislation and update the town's current regulations as necessary to ensure that they are clear and consistent and are taking into account the needs of the community. So what planning tools do we have available to us through this whole planning process? So we are governed by a number of different plans and policies, the first being the Planning Act, the second being the Provincial Planning Statement. Then we have our Municipal Official Plan and our Municipal Zoning Bylaws. The province has mandated ARUs in the province. So basically what we have to do is look at what they've mandated and the guidelines and the information that they have provided and incorporate those into our zoning bylaws. So the location of the proposed amendment, so this zoning amendment would apply to all lands within the town where specific residential uses are permitted. In the settlement area, this includes single detached, semi-detached, block townhouse, and street townhouse dwellings. And outside of the settlement area, so our agricultural, our rural residential lands, and our greenbelt lands, it is in single detached dwellings only. Anything that is in the Niagara Escarpment Development Plan area is not covered by this zoning amendment. So there's a couple of things that I kind of want to talk about first before I get into the actual proposed changes. And there's a few things that we can't change because the province has said this is what you have to do. There's also a few things that we don't want to change because it would have impacts on the larger zoning bylaw as a whole. So one of the things that we are not looking to change are things like lot coverage and setback requirements. These are things that are covered off in the parent zone. So for example, your R1 and your R2 zones, we don't want to go down that path right now at this time. We will be looking at those through a more comprehensive review later on this year. The other item that we don't or can't really look at is the parking requirements. So the province has mandated again that we are only allowed to request one additional parking space per ARU. Technically, we could go to 0, but I don't think that's what anyone wants to do. So we're not looking at that. We also cannot control a minimum number of ARUs. Again, the province says we have to allow for at least 2 ARUs in the urban zone, and only one of these can be in an ancillary detached structure. In the rural and agricultural zones, it's a little bit simpler. So we have to allow up to 2, but we can only allow 2. So that one's pretty straightforward. Again, one of those can be in an ancillary structure. Good news is there are some things that we can look at. So what can the municipality change? We can talk about the maximum number of units in the urban area. We have to allow for 2. We could go up, we could not go down. We can look at the size of the areas. We can look at the definition of gross floor area and how we measure that. We can also look at the separation distance between residential buildings. We can also add things like a percentage size for the ARU compared to a primary residential unit. We can look at it, we can look at ARUs in the basement as being, they can be in the entire basement regardless of size. We can look at a landscaping requirement, and there might be other things that come up through the course of this process that we can look at. So now I'm going to get into the proposed changes. So the first thing that we're looking at, and this is really more of a clarification piece. Right now we have 4 different definitions that kind of say similar things when it comes to floor area. Ultimately, it's confusing. It's confusing for staff, it's confusing for the public, it's confusing for developers because we have all of these different definitions that we have to look at. Essentially, what we're proposing to do is look at gross floor area as a wall-to-wall measurement. And I'll show you a picture on the next slide that kind of helps to clarify that. So currently, the way that we measure gross floor area is sort of how you see on the first drawing there. We actually take out stairways, washrooms, pantries, things like that. So those don't get included in that floor area calculation, which actually could lead to larger ARUs than what we actually, the number that we actually apply to those. What we're proposing in the second picture is it is literally just wall to wall to wall to wall. Done. The whole thing counts, and that's how we're going to measure it. So I think that's a better option. It helps to clarify, and it ensures that if we're giving a maximum number or maximum size for an ARU, that we're meeting that size requirement. So the next thing is we can and we are looking at the maximum number of units in the urban area. So right now the status quo is 4 total units. That is 1 primary unit and up to 3 ARUs. We can look at decreasing to the provincial minimum, which is 3 total units, 1 primary and up to 2 ARUs. Or we could increase. We could go 1 primary unit up to 4 ARUs or 5 ARUs. The province doesn't set a maximum for that number. So those are all kind of options that we can look at. We can also look at the maximum size requirement. And basically it's, again, we are proposing a number. That number can be different. The province does not provide any sort of regulatory information on lot sizes. So we can increase or decrease that number. We can base it on a percentage of the primary dwelling. We can do a combination of both. And we can also kind of add in that provision that if the ARU is located in the basement, it can incorporate or it can include the entire basement. So right now, the maximum floor area that we have in the urban area is about 807 square feet, and we are proposing moving that up to about 1,000 square feet. In the rural area, again, same kind of things happening. We can increase it, we can decrease it, we can base it on a percentage, we can base it on a combination of that. We can look at the basement piece again. And in our rural areas, we permit a max floor area of, it's 1,000 square feet right now. Again, looking to maybe increase that to 1,200 square feet. So something that we can add in is that we can put a separation distance between buildings that contain a residential use and a detached structure that also contains an ARU. We can do that in both urban and rural areas. So again, what that number looks like, we can sort of determine that. The province has suggested a minimum number, but we are also able to define that how we want to through our zoning amendment process. Something else that we can also look at adding is a minimum landscaped space or open space area. And that, again, can apply to urban, rural, or agricultural lands. And so, again, we're looking at potentially introducing a 30% minimum. That number could be 50, that number could be 20. So again, it's just a number that we think is reasonable. We're here to talk about it. And you guys don't have this slide, but one of the questions that we did receive during our public facilitation sessions and through our developer session that we had was, will these regulations that you're proposing work? Will they work in real life? So our planning team took that back and basically looked at what is the average residential lot in the urban area, so Fenwick and Fawn Hill. What's the average house size in those areas? And then we gave some concepts. And in every case, the provisions work. So if you have just the detached, we can meet all those requirements that we're proposing, including parking and landscaping. If you have one that is detached and one that's attached, again, we can make that work. And if we go to if we maintain the 3 units, we can make that work too. So not perfect for every single lot, and we understand that, but if we just look on it on an average basis, these options can work. Okay, so that's kind of it for the really big proposals. You will find in Appendix A all of the things that we're thinking about looking at, but the key proposed regulations are a reduction from 3 ARUs to 2, new definitions for primary dwelling unit, ARU, and gross floor area, which I don't really talk about that, but essentially with the ARU definition, we just want to take the province's definition word for word. Easy peasy. We don't have a definition currently for primary dwelling units. We think by adding that, again, we just allow for more clarity. We're looking at increasing the maximum floor area for them from, as I mentioned, sort of 800 square feet to 1,000 and 1,000 square feet to 1,200, but also capping that or having that maximum of the primary dwellings. So I did some numbers for somebody yesterday, and basically if you have a 1,000 square foot house, it can be 50% to a maximum of, well, it would be 50%, so it would only be 500. But if somebody had a 3,000 square foot house, then the maximum would be the 1,000 square feet. So it would just depend on the size of the primary dwelling, what number would apply there. We're also proposing that minimum separation distance between detached structure and primary dwelling, and we're looking at a landscaped open space requirement of 30%. I just want to reiterate, this is a draft document for comment and discussion. Regulations may change based on the feedback that we receive from everyone tonight. The final bylaw will be presented to council on March 25th through our recommendation report, and then it will go to council for approval in April. So again, just to reiterate, no decisions or recommendations are being made tonight. We are here to listen and learn and have discussion. Following a review of those comments, we will prepare a recommendation report and bring that back to council in March. I think just as a note, please ensure that you do provide your contact information if you do want more information on this. And again, thank you for being here and your participation. I'm also going to add as well, we do have a survey that is up online on our ARU webpage. That's going to be available until February 28th. So please head to that, that site and fill out the survey if you haven't done so already. Thank you.
Okay, Lindsay, thank you, Ms. Richardson. Thank you very much for the presentation. I do know and council appreciates the time and effort that our planning department has put into this, the ARDUs. So that, like, as Lindsay said, we're here to listen one more time We've had, this has been a long process, but we do want to get it right. Staff wants to get it right for the residents, the same as council also wants to make sure we get it right. So again, this is a draft document. Changes get made to draft documents all the time, and staff will be taking notes, and let's get it done. To the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to the public portion of the meeting. I would just remind the gallery that each speaker is allotted a maximum of 10 minutes. When you come forward to the podium, please ensure that the microphone is on. It will turn green when it's on. And we ask that you begin by stating your name for the record. And Mr. Mayor, we do have 2 pre-registered speakers to start us off this evening, so I will now invite Graham Pett to the microphone.
Welcome, Mr. Pett, and thank you for taking the time to address this situation.
Thank you, Mayor. So yes, I am Graham Pett. I'm here representing PATH, Pelham Advocates for Trees and Habitat. So Mr. Mayor and town councilors and town staff, we appreciate the opportunity of having a chance to discuss this issue tonight. Let me first say we want to acknowledge the open and frank discussions we've had with Dr. Dusling and Ms. Richardson regarding this matter. We've had certainly a number of discussions with them, and we thank them very much for their cooperation. PATH fully recognizes the need for densification as precipitates this ARU discussion, particularly in the urban areas of Pelham. We need to preserve our farmland to the greatest degree possible, including our rural woodlots and wetlands and green spaces, thus greatly restricting residential sprawl into the rural areas of Pelham. So we strongly endorse the zoning bylaw which prohibits ARUs in the natural heritage areas. We can accept the allowance of 1 ARU in the Greenbelt region and 2 ARUs in the rural areas. We can support the 1,000 square feet maximum allowance for ARUs in the rural areas. I know Ms. Richardson mentioned maybe a little bit bigger. Our concern is that we must guard against creating mega ARUs in our rural areas, even if we have bigger lots. Now, we know densification will cost us the loss of some trees and green space. In a recent infill done in town here, we lost some 18 trees. We also know that trees and their root systems don't respect property lines, so there certainly could be cases where neighbors and even town trees could be negatively impacted by a development. We therefore ask that this zoning bylaw mandate a tree inventory, a tree saving, and a tree replanting plan. If enough replacement trees cannot be planted on the property in question, then we believe the developer should pay dollars into a town administered fund so that trees can be planted elsewhere to try to make up for these lost trees. Now, we know for a while the new official plan designates a 40% urban tree canopy by 2035. There's no time to lose more and more trees without a strong effort to plant replacement trees lost to development. We expect our larger developers to plant trees. We should have no less expectations of our smaller developers. PATH cannot stress enough that if we don't get dead serious about saving as many of our mature trees as possible and planting more trees, we run the serious risk of turning urban Pelham into a mini Brampton. A 40% tree canopy won't magically happen. Such a goal requires strong legislative mandates, such as a zoning bylaw, as well as, of course, increasing tree planting budgets. PATH fully supports a minimum 30% green space requirement for ARUs, both urban and rural, along with the 1 parking place per ARU. The landscape area should be green. It must be green. Where physical structures and materials are used, these should be permeable. So this is truly a 30% permeable area. LID practices should be on full display. And we don't believe pools should be considered when ARUs are being constructed. Of course, If we don't allow enough green space, snow melt and rain runoff will end up in neighbors' basements. And heaven knows we already have enough flooding issues in Pelham. We don't need to manufacture anymore. We sincerely hope Council will take our comments and recommendations into account when you finalize the bylaw. We appreciate the opportunity of having spoken with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pett. Appreciate your time. I'll turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our next pre-registered speaker is Tim Nohara.
Tim, welcome back in front of council. You've been here before.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors, staff. Thanks for having me. I need these glasses now, so maybe that's changed. Or maybe I was in denial then and less so now. Thanks, Lindsay, for the opportunity to come here before you. I've looked over the Appendix A, and I have a few very specific comments, almost all around, especially after the presentation, Lindsay, almost all about clarification, just in the wording, so it's clear. So I'm going to make reference to specific sections, if that's okay. So Section A, lowercase b, Roman numeral 3. If I use that terminology, do we know what I'm referring to? So there, you include a new definition for the gross floor area as a new definition. I just asked to consider, right now it says floor area, comma, gross, but everywhere in the document it says gross floor area. So I just recommend, if you can, to make it gross floor area. Actually, in the view graph, Lindsay, in one place it did, but in the document that was circulated, it was sort of using the old terminology. I think it would be clearer if it really just said gross floor area. All the other comments are in Section B, and they're in Section 329.1F and 329.2F. It states, a detached ancillary structure legally established on or before the date of passing of this bylaw may be converted to an ARU without the need to comply with current zoning regulations, provided the ARU requirements are met and no openings are added to a wall that would otherwise not otherwise comply. So I'd like to reference two phrases in that and just ask what they mean. I'm just not sure what they mean. So the first phrase I'd like to highlight in that section is without the need to comply with current zoning regulations. Could I just understand what that means? I just don't know what that means.
Go ahead.
Is that
Ms.
okay?
Richardson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter. So essentially what that means is that if an existing shed were built, perhaps, and it met the requirements of the previous zoning bylaw, so our 1987 bylaw, it's essentially legal non-conforming with our current bylaw, but it exists. So the intent of that is that if someone wanted to put an ARU in there, they wouldn't have to go through the minor variance process because it's already in existence. So
Okay.
kind of just a...
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. One more clarification. In the latter part of that paragraph, it says, and no openings are added to all that would not otherwise comply. I'm just not sure. You obviously have an image in your mind, and I'm just not sure what that's referring to.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter. Yes, so essentially what that would mean is that if you didn't meet, for example, the side yard setback, we wouldn't want you to have any openings on that wall, basically, so that it's more, I think, for how can I explain this? Like your side yard, we wouldn't want those openings closer to the neighbor.
Got it.
Essentially,
That's what you're trying to achieve?
If I can
Thank
be,
you.
And again, if someone did want to do something like that, then they would come through with a variance and we would look at it on a case-by-case basis. But essentially, it's just we don't want those openings closer to a neighboring property than they truly should be.
The properties I'm interested in have almost no neighbors, so that's why I'm asking the questions. The language, there's 3 sections in the bylaw amendment, 329(1), 2, and 3, referring to 3 different urban settlement, rural, and greenbelt, and that's helpful. You may want to look at the applicability in some of those areas, but I understand what you're saying. Just for clarity, certainly in an urban setting, I understand the images. Thank you. Could you add, so my last comment on this one here is, could you add, so this is 329(1)(f) and 329(2)(f), so urban and rural. This paragraph is missing from 329(3), and I was asking if you could add this paragraph to that section. It seems like it may have been an oversight, but I'm not sure. Yes? Thank you. I know there's no decisions here. I'm just asking the question. Thank you. All right, next paragraph, Bravo B 329(3), and the last few I have are all in 329(3), so they're all in the Greenbelt area for the benefit of everybody else here. 329(3)(a), it says, in addition to the primary dwelling unit, 1 ARU is permitted in a single detached dwelling unit or within a detached ancillary structure, provided the detached ancillary structure was constructed prior to July 1st, 2017, and the primary dwelling unit or detached ancillary structure is located outside of the Greenbelt Plan Natural Heritage System. I have 2 clarifying questions just on that wording. The first, can you clarify that with this proposed language, we can have up to 2 ARUs in the Greenbelt area? I believe that's there now. I can't tell from the wording whether you're intending to have 2 or whether it might be interpreted as 1.
Ms. Richardson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter. So with the way that it is currently written in the proposed bylaw, it is intended to just be 1.
Intended to decrease?
Yes, that's correct. We are still kind of looking at that internally because we are not entirely sure either. There's not a lot of legislation or policy in the Greenbelt Plan that speaks to anything to do with ARUs other than just permitting them. So we are working through sort of a best practices and doing some further research on that. So that is something that we are looking at, and
Sure.
we can absolutely take that comment into consideration.
Yeah, so I would urge you keep it the way it is at 2, and I would urge that, I would share a couple comments on that. One, we've had this for 3 years, and I don't think there's any rollout of ARUs in this plan area, in the Greenbelt area. There might be 1 that has been constructed, I'm not sure. So this is not 0. So this is not an issue of sprawl, if you will. It just isn't. This is an issue for families who live in the rural area and have children, adult children, and they're able to accommodate them. That's really that's where I'm speaking from with my wife. So I'd urge you, if you can, to keep that. The second clarifying question, you make reference to July 1st, 2017 in this paragraph. I just don't know what the significance of that date is.
To Ms. Richardson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter. That's another thing that we're looking at. So the initial Greenbelt Plan was passed in December of 2004. So most wording when it comes to existing refers back to that particular date. This July 1st date is when amendments took place that included that ARU piece about allowing them. So we're still looking at that. Again, it's probably more of a best practices, and it may end up being the 2004 date, not the 2017 date. But it's something that we also have flagged as a problem, and we are looking at.
In 2017, just my recollection, I could be off, but I don't think ARUs were discussed in 2017. I think they came later, but I could be wrong on that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you might be right. That's the latest updated version that the province has put out.
Two more, and these are easier. These are, so section 329.3F, 329.3F, Bravo 329.3F, it states individual on-site sewage services and individual on-site water services must be adequate to service the ARUs and are encouraged to be shared. Approval from the relevant authority must be obtained before the ARU can be approved. My clarification question is around the word individual. There's two instances of the word individual. And I absolutely agree with the spirit of encouraging shared, if you can do that, keeping the land as close to pure as you can. The words individual, I'm wondering if you need them there. They seem to suggest to me that it might conflict with shared. In other words, it seems to suggest to me that somebody could argue, look, is it individual or is it shared? I don't know that you need those words. I'm just raising that point.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter, those are actually, the reason we've used that wording is those are defined terms in our zoning bylaw. However, that was, that may have to change. So we can absolutely have a look at that.
It just seems to conflict. I'm just raising
No,
that
and that's totally fair. We still may have to look at that, so thank you.
And the last one, thank you for indulgence, 329.3G. It says the minimum landscaped open space shall be 30% of the total lot area. Okay. In the images that you shared a moment ago at the start of this presentation, you had a couple nice drawings there with different views of 1, 2, or 3 ARUs in the urban area and the calculations against the 30%. I think I know what you're trying to achieve, and I fully support it. I don't think in the rural area, the way it's worded, you're actually getting what. So let me tell you what I think the words mean. If I have 10 acres in my rural lot, I need to deal and prepare 3 acres of landscaped open space. The way it's worded, I don't think you want me to have to create 3 acres of, I might be in a forested area and I have 1 acre around the primary residence. So I just think it needs to be reworded to say what I think you mean. Okay. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim, for bringing these matters to staff's attention. Thank you. To the clerk.
Through Mr. Mayor, that concludes our list of pre-registered speakers. You may now open to the gallery if you wish.
Okay, thank you. So now we go to the gallery. Anyone here present that would like to make a presentation? And we have a gentleman. Please come forward, state your name, and you have the floor, sir.
Good evening. My name's Tom Svab. Thanks for your time, counselors, staff, etc. Got a few statements I want to make, not so much in the way of questions. One, I can take us to like 10,000 feet or 100,000 feet here. And one of the primary drivers between all this AR stuff going on in the province is the concept of creating affordable living space. But the province doesn't necessarily give quantitative information as to what affordable is. It gives something qualitative, a description, and what the province says is basically 30% of a household's income up to the 60th percentile in an area is the line for affordability. So what the heck does that really mean? In Pelham, because this information is almost impossible to get, in Pelham, the research I've done, that creates that line at about $2,400 a month in rent. So if you look up where you can, average household income, Niagara Falls has some information in the strategic plan, you can work out to about $2,400 a month rent. So what I'm asking council to consider is when you look at your decision makings around ARUs, and the concept is to drive affordability, is whatever getting approved going to result in properties or living units that are going to be less than $2,400 a month? Because if they're not, if they're getting bigger, you can't use the argument about affordability anymore to justify your decisions. Now you're going to be into monetizing assets and things like that, which are there good and bad points there, but stop using the words affordability as your primary drivers here. Secondly, the province only legislated 3 minimum living units on a lot, which is great. We're all on the same page with that now. But that's the only thing they've mandated. They haven't mandated meeting any of their desired growth or planning targets or things like that. So I've heard the mayor mention about we have to set the province or set the town up to grow for an extra 10 or 12,000 people in so many years. Great, that's all plans, but none of it's legislated. The province can't make you do anything here, right? You represent the citizens and the residents of the town. I think that's your primary obligation, and it's not to the province unless they legislate. So let's keep that in mind when we go through our decision-making processes here, okay? Open space. I was very happy to see that concept introduced a few weeks ago. I'd like to clarify a few things here. To me, and this was written in the fine print on the slide, it does not include parking, whether permeable or not. It does not include parking, sidewalks, etc. So I want to make sure we're crystal clear on that. And the way I would view the 30% number is that's a minimum requirement. The 50% lot coverage is a maximum, and you can balance those things to achieve whatever parking you want. So I want to make sure we're crystal clear in understanding my belief on what that 30% open space represents, as well as probably a lot of others. Okay. I'd like to thank the town and councilors for their patience getting through all this. I think we've been hammering away at this for 6 or 7 months, and I am kind of seeing some results and closure coming to it soon. I just want to make sure we kind of stay in the mindset of 3 ARUs and work in the concepts of affordability. Okay, thank you. Any questions?
None right now.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I just
Oh.
have one.
Well, we should wait until we have all the presentations.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
He said 3 ARUs.
And maybe that was the last one, but that's how we usually do it. Okay. Anyone else that's present that would like to approach, sir?
Make sure we're on the same page.
Oh, well, that's okay. You.
Jumped up first.
Please state your name, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. My name's Joanne Jones. To the councilors and staff, I have a few concerns, and I'm a newbie here, so bear with me. Who will pay for the upgrades to the infrastructure? The ARU owners, or will it be residents at large? If it's the ARU builders, will this be a disincentive? And if it's the residents, why should they pay? They're not getting any monetary benefits. Do you have to reside in the home to have your ARUs? Will there be a limit to how many ARUs or how many houses can build ARUs in a neighborhood? And who will compensate the neighbors for the increased traffic and noise and loss of privacy and de-evaluation of their homes? If you don't have to live in the home to build these ARUs, and if there are no limits, are we not encouraging, or may not we be encouraging landlord slums? Basically, those are my concerns.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Staff has been making notes, and will, I'm sure that will be addressed in the final report. And I believe the gentleman in the back. I thought I recognized you. State your name, and you have the floor.
Parting my hair differently now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, my name's Craig Larmer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors, and staff. I appreciate the opportunity to address you on this matter tonight. As Ms. Richardson noted, there have been a huge number of changes at the province over the last 20 years, but over the last couple of years in particular, where they have inserted themselves into local planning matters, that's for sure. As you know, the Planning Act requires council in its decision-making to be consistent with provincial policy statements and in conformity with provincial plans and official plans, provincial plans and official plans. And I'm only stating that because I just want to start with a quick summary of what I see as applicable planning policy. The provincial policy statement says, planning authorities shall support general intensification and redevelopment to support the achievement of complete communities, including by planning for a range of mixed and housing options. So housing options, that's a new term that's in the provincial planning statement that came out in 2024. And it's defined in the provincial policy statement as including almost every type of housing style you could imagine. It even mentions tiny homes, laneway housing, additional residential units, low and mid-rise apartments. It's the whole gamut, from singles to mid-density development. Specific to housing, policy 2.2 of the provincial policy statement says that planning authorities shall provide for an appropriate range of mix and housing options and densities to meet projected needs of current and future residents. So there is a very specific drive from the province to broaden the types and varieties of houses that are being provided. One of the ways that it says that the municipality shall do that is by permitting and facilitating all types of residential intensification, including development and introduction of new housing options within previously developed areas and redevelopment, which results in a net increase in residential units. So they are envisioning neighborhoods being redeveloped with a higher intensity of development. In the town's official plan, and I'm talking about the adopted official plan, I recognize that it hasn't been approved by the province yet, but we see that this is council's most recent expression of policy. This is your policy direction for the future development of the town. And there are 19 references to the aforementioned housing options. So your new official plan, whenever it's approved by the province, is very specific to addressing this issue of the provincial policy statement. The vision for the town says neighborhoods will be vibrant and accessible with affordable housing options available to all residents, fostering a sense of belonging and opportunity. You have some specific policies under residential intensification. It says under policy 3331, the town will support all types of residential intensification, including developing and introducing new housing options within previously developed areas and redevelopment resulting in a net increase of residential units. So almost exactly what we read in the provincial policy statement. In reference to housing supply, the town shall encourage innovative and compatible housing, which may represent non-traditional additions to the town's housing stock. So there is an expectation that you're going to see different types of development introduced into established neighborhoods. That's what the council's position is as expressed in the official plan. And then policy 3413, the town shall develop flexible zoning and other implementation standards that permit a range and mix of housing forms, types, and tenures to help eliminate barriers to housing, specifically affordable housing and additional needs housing. Again, that's your expression of the desired outcome in the town. There's some more conversation about affordable housing under policy 3452, and it speaks to permitting and facilitating all forms of housing. Under the current zoning bylaw, so 4481 2022, that was in July of 2022, council directed staff to prepare a bylaw that said you're allowed to have 3 additional residential units in the residential areas. And the town was ahead of the curve at that point. Since then, there's been a number of municipalities, some because of the Housing Accelerator Fund requirement, but a number of municipalities that have just done it because they viewed it as being the good thing, have allowed for a similar approach, 3 additional residential units in residential zones. In the October 2025 housekeeping report, so that was the first one that the municipality started with, there was a couple of specific references. It said staff have undertaken a best practices review of ARU regulations in other municipalities, in other Ontario municipalities. I'm just wondering, is that available?
I'll turn to our planning department.
Through the mayor to Craig, we haven't made that specifically available, but we can definitely share that information.
Thank you, I would appreciate that. Also in the report, it says, while the existing regulations for ARUs in the town are appropriate, staff will assess the regulations in the context of the best practices. So at this point in time, there was no discussion about number of units changing. It would seem clear that the best practices review didn't indicate that there was any necessity to do that. At the November 12th public meeting, there were two parties who spoke about ARUs, and both made specific reference to the Emmett Street development. There were two other parties that provided comments that were included in the December 17th, 2025 recommendation report to council. They weren't specific to any property, but they talked about what they considered to be a misinterpretation of the Planning Act in terms of how many units were permitted. And then there was some question about implementation of character and appropriateness. But those were the only four comments that the council had received at that time. In the December 17th, 2025 ARU report that resulted in this process, staff advised the project will enable the public to comment on all provisions and definitions related to ARUs, and will also instruct staff to conduct a comprehensive review and study. The report went on to say that the changes that were being proposed were the name of SDUs and ARUs, along with minor clarifications to the definition, and then two contemplated changes in provisions regarding the size in the agricultural zone and the clarification of existing accessory structures. The December report made no mention of number of units. In council's deliberation of that report, and I watched the video again, there was no mention of units. Neither did council's resolution address or provide any direction on number of units. The notice of the public meeting that was issued on January 23rd, it largely matched the contents of the information report. Again, no mention on the number of units. However, staff issued a draft zoning bylaw amendment that proposes a reduction in the number of units to a maximum of 2. So that was the first time that presumably this council saw it, and I suspect that council didn't provide any direction unless there was something that was provided in a separate council meeting that I just wasn't able to see. I asked staff about the move to 2 ARUs, and I was advised that the reduction was proposed in response to comments and feedback from previous meetings and discussions. I also asked staff if the proposed change in number of units was related to a site-specific development. I was assured that it was not. However, they also confirmed that the only development involving 3 ARU provisions was the development on Emmett Street. So all of the available information points to Emmett Street development being the catalyst for the reduction in units. I'm going to suggest that the town is basing a decision on the impacts of a construction project without considering consistency with the provincial policy statement or conformity with the provincial plans and official plan. This development is not yet occupied. There's no evidence that its residential use is incompatible with the neighborhood. In order to achieve good planning, I suggest that additional information is required to properly inform the public and council in its consideration of any changes. In the December report, staff identified the importance of the public having an opportunity to comment on all provisions and definitions. I'm going to suggest that the rationale behind the proposed provisions and definitions can only be understood if the town first makes the referenced best practices review and comprehensive review study available to the public. In this case, the town is bringing forward, in my mind, that is not unreasonable. In my mind, that's not an unreasonable request. to have those pieces of information available to the public to provide more comment. If a private person brings forward a Planning Act application, among other things, the town requires the submission of a planning justification report. So you require anybody that comes in for a zoning bylaw amendment to provide their planning opinion, gets debated in the public consultation at a public meeting. Council is fully aware of what the planner's position is, and so is the public. They understand everything that is going on, all the legislation that they're relying on to justify the proposed amendment. And that's a reasonable request because it forms the basis for which the zoning application is being submitted. In this case, the town is bringing forward the ARU zoning bylaw amendment without any documented planning, opinion, or justification. And tonight during the presentation, we heard that staff is preparing certain provisions, but they could change. It's 30%, but it could be 10 or 15. That will be addressed at the time that the recommendation report is provided to council. This approach to me is problematic because what it does is it ends up dividing people and making it an adversarial position where somebody says 4 is the right number, 3 is the right number, 2 is the right number. What is it based on? We're not basing our decision on the same policy. For this reason, I'm requesting that this process be placed on hold and that another public meeting be convened after the best practices review and comprehensive review and study are made available to the public. I know the staff is anticipating bringing forward a recommendation report on March 25th. Respectfully, we don't know what that will say. By the time it gets published, it's too late for anyone to request to appear in front of council as a delegation. Council requires in the procedural bylaw to submit a request 10 days before the item is discussed in the hearing. The report isn't actually available until 5 days before. So there's no possible way of providing a detailed request for a delegation to council. I have a number of other concerns with the bylaw. Mr. Nohara caught a couple of them. I just want to talk about landscaping a little bit more. Landscaped area is a defined term in the zoning bylaw. Am I over?
You are, but you know what? We don't seem to have a lot of speakers tonight, so continue.
Thank you. I'll be quick. Landscaped area, it is defined, and it says that it has to be a permeable area, and it cannot be used for any other use. So in Mr. Nohara's scenario where you have a 10-acre parcel, 3 acres has to be set aside for landscaped open space. I know that staff is going to look at that. It could be worse, though. If you have 100 acres, now you have a 30-acre patch of parkland in your rear yard. So,
I have 1 acre. So I just used a simple method.
Trees are good, though.
The additional residential unit definition, it references Provincial Policy Statement 2024. I don't believe it is in the Provincial Policy Statement. And the definition is different than the one that you just included in the housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment. So that needs some address. Gross floor area, there's a few issues. The biggest one to me is that this amendment is proposed as part of a process advertised as additional residential units. So somebody could get that and say, I don't care. I'm not doing any ARUs, and I'm not worried about somebody next door to me doing it either. The problem is that there are a number of definitions that are deleted that are found in other places in the zoning bylaw. So for an example, you have agriculturally related uses, non-farm diversified uses that rely on some of those definitions. I don't know if the Agricultural Advisory Committee has been consulted on that, but that maybe should have happened. It also affects home occupations, home industries, commercial zones, and parking requirements. There's also a proposal that a number of terms be deleted, like floor area dwelling unit, floor area gross, and habitable room. Again, those are found all over the place in the zoning bylaw under farm produce outlet, commercial greenhouse, agriculture-related use, on-farm diversified use, home-based business, setback from slopes, other parking regulations, and seasonal and permanent farm help house provisions. There's a number of references to ancillary building and ancillary structure. Those are terms that are used under the Ontario Regulation 299/19, which is additional residential units. Those terms aren't used in the zoning bylaw. It's accessory building and structure. So that should probably be changed. There's the references to detached garage. That's not a defined term either. It should probably be accessory building or structure again. I think that's it. That's all I have. I probably have more. I'll provide that in a written submission, and I'll provide all of this as well to the clerk. But,
All right.
thank you very much. So just to conclude, I'd appreciate if this matter were deferred until the additional information, including staff's justification report for the changes, is available for public discussion. Thank
Okay,
you.
yeah.
Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Again, we will take questions when we run out of speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do, I will ask one, anybody else want to speak? We do have one. Well, we've got a couple. Okay, excellent. Nope, you, ma'am, first. While you make your way to the podium, I just would like to say that I believe that the town has been very transparent on this subject, and we've had we've had the open house back in January, and now we're having the statutory meeting. It'll be Mr. CAO. Any further comments? I realize if you have any, sir.
Well, it was 3 additional open houses beyond this meeting, so 1 for the development community and then 2 for the community at large, all of which were reasonably well attended, and certainly by some of the members of the audience and members of council while we're at it, and representatives of the development community. I think they just forgot to mention that, perhaps. But yes, so we are well down, and then, of course, we keep taking in comments online through the survey, electronic surveys. So we kind of have had 4 opportunities to date through this process at this point in time.
Okay, thank you for that. Sorry, ma'am. So your name, and you have the floor.
I think the gray button.
It's on. Oh, now it's off.
Sorry, just one more time. Yeah.
One more.
Right at the microphone top, it'll go green.
There you go.
Okay. I'm Patty Brown, longtime resident of Font Hill. Went to Font Hill Public School. That tells you how long I've been there. Just a couple of questions that I didn't hear addressed this evening. Number 1 is some of the cities, municipalities in the area have been giving incentives to build these ARUs on city lands or on private lands. Personally, I'm an older gal. I would love my children to come back to the area and live back in Pelham. I'd like to entice them so that if I'm out of the main unit, then maybe they would take over my home. That's kind of, so are there incentives for us to do so? And I understand that reducing it from 2 to 1, that leaves a couple of my kids out of these options. So that's one of my queries. How will the units be taxed? Are they taxed individually? Are they going to be taxed as part of my entire property? If it's a portable unit and it's removed, then it's no longer part of the taxation process. And those are my queries.
Okay. Thank you. So if I will try to do, I'll turn this over to the CAO, but I know St. Catharines, I believe is who you're referencing. It was $80,000 or $90,000 per unit, and I think they actually increased that. And that was because the number of houses they were building, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. CAO, they ended up getting a very big grant, and they took that grant for that purpose.
Okay.
Pelham did not have that grant.
Hasn't applied for the grant yet?
Okay. Okay. Well, we don't have one in St. Cat in Pelham, but I will turn to the CEO to fill that answer out.
No, Your Worship, you essentially got it in one. The province of Ontario made monies available to major municipalities. We don't qualify to even put in an application. St. Catharines opted to use their monies to provide financial incentives to private landowners. Mm-hmm. So they do have the program, and it is upwards of $100,000. I can't remember the last figure they landed at, but it was pretty heavily subscribed. So that is unfortunately not in the cards for the town of Pelham.
Yeah.
Or any smaller community, frankly. And then the second piece is taxation. is a long, complicated thing, but in essence, MPAC is a provincial, it's not directly part of the provincial government anymore, although it is directly legislated by the province, and the people who work there once upon a time were civil servants. At any rate, it is a service corporation that assesses the value of land and properties, to every property in the province of Ontario, and then municipalities take that value and
Use the mill
multiply
rate.
it by their mill rate and get to, and that results in a tax bill. So ultimately, MPAC sets tax rates and decides property values. So they're the ones in charge of that. We react when at occupancy, really.
So
You
in
pay
my
tax on vacant
circumstances
land,
is
but-
what I'm
It would be
thinking.
included in
I'm
the
not going to
tax
be on this planet forever, but should there not be the need for the unit any longer, me being in that residence, remove it, do they reduce the taxation at that point in time? You don't know
Again,
yet.
it's not a perfectly linear answer to you, but significant changes in property that result in, are supposed to require building permits. And that's renovation, demolition, addition, so more or less, supposed to require a building permit. A building permit triggers MPAC. MPAC eventually comes out and looks at a property and sees how it's changed. So if you added a fireplace, or you took away a secondary dwelling unit, or there are a dozen changes you can make to a property. In theory, almost any of them change the value, either up or down, as the case may be. And then that sort of automatically flows to the municipality, which in turn changes up or down the amount of tax one has to pay.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
And thank you for your presentation tonight. Any other speakers? Yes, sir. Please state your name and you have the floor.
Yep. My name is Giorgio Panici. I'm a longtime resident of Fawn Hill. Mayor and council, thanks very much for allowing me to speak in front of you tonight. I just had a couple of points I just wanted to add to the whole process. One is regarding the gross floor area. In real estate, we normally use the measurements to the outside of the exterior wall for the gross area, not on the inside. If I understand correctly, when I was reading some of the material, and excuse me, I'm a bit of a latecomer to the process, but I wanted to add a few things to it. I think it was designed to be on the inside of the wall, if I remember correctly, but in real estate, we always use it to the exterior of the wall, to the outside of the exterior wall to measure gross area of any building, whether it's a commercial building, residential building, and so on. So I'd like to suggest that as an amendment or an addition to how you define the gross floor area. Second point I just wanted to add as well is that in calculation for the percentage, or whether this landscaping or how large the unit can be on the property, I would suggest that we exclude any areas of setback requirements and any areas of easement, because basically easements removes your total bundle of rights for the land, and you cannot use it, for example, Hydro One corridor, which is in many areas in the town. And setback requirements are basically sterile. We can't use them. We have to be back, whatever it is in the town, and excuse me, I don't know what it is. I think it's 3 feet, approximately 1 meter. Those areas cannot be used. Therefore, they're basically sterile to the property as usefulness to the property owner. The third thing I wanted to ask, and again, being a latecomer, is there a consent process for building the ARUs? Does one exist right now? I don't know that. I'm asking the question. So do you have to ask permission from an adjacent landowner?
I'll go to Pam Dusling, Director of Planning.
So through you, the mayor, I'm not 100% sure of the question. Maybe you can expand a little bit more before we try to
Certainly,
answer.
yeah, absolutely. So with the ARUs, and it depends on where they're built, I mean, how congested the area is, the residential. I'm thinking more of an urban setting here rather than a rural setting. I can't see Personally, I can't see a lot of objection in a rural area because of size of lots. Again, there are varying sizes, but some of the other speakers were talking about large parcels of land, so I don't see it a big issue. But in an urban area where you've got a more condensed area of R1 zoning, do we have any provisions in the process to go and ask the immediate adjacent and abutting landowner for their consent for the ARU to be built? That's what I'm aiming at. And I say this in a spirit of collaboration and cooperation between the subject property and the individuals that will impact around them, because it will impact them somehow, visually, property value. There is a negative component, especially during the building. After the building is done, that tends to diminish a bit. But for a spirit of cooperation, collaboration, is there a consent process? If there isn't, I would suggest the immediate and abutting landowners be required to provide that consent.
I will go to the Director of Planning, Ms. Pam Dusling.
Thank you. Through the mayor, to the presenter, I appreciate the clarification. The word consent in the world of planning means something very different. So,
yes. Okay.
I appreciate that clarification. The quick answer is no. And these rules that we're talking about tonight would be as of right on the property. So there would be no planning application required. Therefore, there would be, under the Planning Act, no requirement to notify neighbors, existing surrounding neighbors. So the quick answer is no.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And it's like some of the other projects that have happened within the town. I think that if there was a cooperation between the adjacent landowners, a lot of the controversy that we see today may be minimized, maybe even eliminated, hopefully. I'm in favor of development, providing it's appropriate development. But that's the reason why I ask consent. In a lot of the work I do, I need consent from everybody, and whether it's First Nations groups or whatever. So in the end result, it provides for a lot of cooperation, collaboration between. I would suggest that if something like that could be built in it, if it's not too late at this point, I think it would go a long way and really help a lot with the process.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
But just, why don't we clarify that, Ms. Dusling? I believe that as a right, that is a provincial statute, is it not?
Yes. As a property.
I mean, it's not something we can play with.
Yes, what the bylaw in essence entails is that property owners as of right can do these things. They don't need approval from the municipality. They need a building permit, but they don't need any more planning permissions, nor do they need neighbors' permissions.
Thank you. Welcome to Planning 2026.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other speakers? Okay, and Mr. Heska, thank you for, I'm sorry, state your name and state your name and you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson, for introducing me. We've met more than once. This is my first time to sit into one of these ARU meetings, but I've read in the media and talked to some friends on that. And one of the things question I have is an ARU in an urban area, is an AR unit tied into that property? I've got a lot 80 by 150 with a single family dwelling on it. If I put an AR unit on it, is that permanently tied to that residence, or can it be separated so I can sell my house and one of my family or somebody else buys the ARU separately? Can that be separated? And if you do it in urban, how does it happen in rural, where you go and you might have 2 or 3 on a lot? Tim's got 40 acres. He wants to build 2 ARUs on his property, not adjacent to his house, but different locations. Are you committed that if you want to sell, you got to sell the whole package together, or can you separate at some point in time?
I'll go to a Director of Planning, Ms. Dusling.
So through you, the mayor, to the presenter, good question. The intent is that the ARUs would be tied to the parcel of land. Now, there may be opportunities in the urban area to sever those if they're done in the right conformity. But in the rural area, there's definitely no opportunity to sever ARUs.
I don't expect our friend Ford in Toronto's even thought of that, but I think it's an issue that I could see in the horizon. It could be a real estate and an issue, and with some of, I've been here over 40 years, and some of the development that's going on for urbanization, I shake my head. In terms of a community, a tight community, close-knit, a lot of cooperation, as the previous person spoke, I think there's a lack of cooperation. As a result, we're building up walls within neighborhoods, and it's not a good situation. I sense that in Emmett Street. I've heard nothing but negative on that, and I sense that it's a snowball that's growing, and I don't think that's what our town of Pelham wants. Just my comment.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Heska. Any other speakers? You've already spoken, sir.
Give that gentleman there more than 10 minutes.
Okay, go ahead. Please,
Give him two.
please keep it down, please.
Give him
Okay,
two.
I appreciate that.
Thanks for getting me back.
And seeing as you're our last speaker, Councilor Nesnick has a question for you.
Oh,
when
do
you're
you want to
done.
ask your question first?
Sure, please, thank you. So when you, just as you were ending, you said something about a total, about having three ARUs. Did you mean keep
I
the
meant
three ARUs
three
or
residential
three?
dwellings.
Three dwellings on one piece
Yeah,
of property,
primary,
meaning
two
the
RUs.
main home plus two ARUs?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought you meant, so I just wanted to make sure I was clear on what you were hoping for.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So we're beyond that now.
Okay.
Three family units on a legal piece of property. One point I didn't make when I was up earlier, I talked about the affordability number being around 2,400 or something per my calculations. I'm an accountant, by the way. I can read statistics and whatever, so give me a little bit of credibility with that. What I also found was the average rent for Pelham was slightly around that number, it was around $2,500. Now, averages don't equate to the 60th percentile, et cetera. But when I look at that, I'm thinking, does Pelham have an affordability rent issue? Right? I can't answer that because I don't have sufficient data. I know the data is out there. I don't know why the government doesn't publish any of it. But I'm not really sure if we have a rent dollar issue in Pelham. We may have an availability of units, and people can't live in Pelham, so they got to go somewhere else. That's probably a little bit of a different issue. So I just want to make sure we got that. And I felt compelled to come up because I had to challenge this gentleman's statement back there. He made a statement that the issues that developed at 29 Emmett Street were kind of like an aberration, a hiccup, some kind of glitch. What went on there is a representation of a failing of the planning and government processes in Pelham, right? Nobody had an issue with it when it was just policy and in the Planning Act. Nobody had an issue when the bylaws were written because people really didn't know what it meant until it hit the street. And we had a developer there that stayed within the legal boundaries of all the bylaws and rules, and he created something and got it on Emmett Street that doesn't fit the character of the neighborhood. That's why people are upset. I've got no issue with 3 ARUs where they fit and they make sense in the neighborhood. I haven't got issue with 4 or 5 either, right? But you guys have to write rules and regulations to keep everybody happy. People on Emmett Street aren't happy. I didn't want to bring up Emmett Street again. This gentleman did. I just want to point out to you that his point of view is not necessarily should be where the town is going. I don't want to call it biased. I suspect the gentleman's a developer or represents a developer, and he doesn't live on Emmett Street. I live on Emmett Street, and it didn't go over well. So I think you guys know all that. I just felt compelled to come back up here and let you hear it one more time. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Apologize for that. Thank you. Any questions? Just go sit down. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. And again, thank you for your time and comments that you've made on the document. Thank you. One last time, any other speakers in the audience? And so then we go twice and 3 times.
open auction.
Just like it's sold. I turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That now closes the public portion of the meeting, and we can move to committee input.
Excellent. So now I turn to members of council. Any comments, questions to the presenters, questions to staff at this time? This is the opportunity to do it. And I see, oh, Councilor Nesnick. By all means.
Thank you. So just, so before I came tonight, I had a few questions, but they've actually been sort of answered by Ms. Richardson. So through you, Mr. Mayor, just to confirm, the rural properties are limited to a total of a main dwelling plus 2 ARUs at the current, and that would be maintained. Whereas I was thinking, because it's a larger piece of property, could you not consider moving to a 3 ARU unit plus a main home?
To Ms. Richardson.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. So our current zoning bylaw does permit 3.
Plus a home?
Plus the primary, correct. So a total of, I know it's so complicated. I'll just go with the ARU piece. So 3 ARUs are permitted currently. The provincial planning statement is the document that outlines the requirements for agricultural or properties that are outside of the settlement area, and it only permits, or it only speaks to a maximum of 2. So we are actually wrong right now. So part of this amendment is correcting some of those inaccuracies. So again, the proposal at this point would be to go down to 2 ARUs, which is in keeping with the provincial policy. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is, so should a property owner within the urban boundary decide that, you know what, I would like to have my main home, but I also want to add 3 ARUs. Is there a process of coming back to zoning to have that reviewed, and what's the process that would look like?
Ms. Richardson?
Thank you again, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Yes, there are processes that could be considered if council did decide to approve a bylaw that reduced the number to 2. Someone could come in with a zoning application or a minor variance application, depending on the context, for an additional unit or an additional 2 units. So there is a planning process to address that.
So just through you, Mr. Mayor, so just to confirm, would that be something to go through the Committee of Adjustment, or would that come to council?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, again, depending on the context. If it was a minor variance, it would go through the Committee of Adjustment. If it was through a zoning amendment, it would come through council. And it would go through, obviously, a full public process, which would include notifications so the neighbors would know what's going on in that instance.
Thanks. I'm just going to follow up a little bit. Most likely, I think what the answer you're looking for, is it going for a zoning or is it going through minor variance? Most likely it's going to come to council through a zoning because it's an additional use on the property. It would be difficult, probably, under the Planning Act for it to meet the 4 tests of a variance.
Okay, that makes me feel more comfortable then. Thank you. I think those were my questions, so I have no more further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I see, yep, Councillor Wink on Zoom. Go ahead, sir. Oh, we can't hear you. Nope, no. Nope, still can't.
Someone reads those.
Type it in the chat. You have the chat feature?
Any suggestions from IT?
No, everything looks like it's working.
Just hang on a minute, John. We still can't hear you. Try again, sir.
So how's that?
There we go. We got it.
Okay.
The clerk comes to the rescue again. Whoa.
Hang on. You cut him off.
Wait, John. John.
To change the square footage from
Totally opposite.
800 square feet to 1,000 square feet for the ARU units.
John, can you, we missed the first part of that question. Could you
I
come
can't
back
hear
again?
you now.
Oh,
Repeat.
present day technology. Just hang on a minute.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Okay.
Oh, got you now. Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Yes. Can you,
Okay, thank you.
can you start at the beginning of your question, please?
Yeah, 100%. So what was the, to planning staff, what was the impetus to change the square footage from 800 square feet per unit to 1,000 square feet per unit?
To the Director of Planning, Ms. Dewsling.
Thank you through the mayor to Councillor Wink. Good question. We had heard through some comments from the public, especially in the rural area, that they would like to see an opportunity for larger units. But more than anything, it is because of how we're measuring or proposing to measure gross floor area. That we wanted an opportunity for units to be of the same nature and size that they are now without, with calculating it differently. Like if you remember Lindsay's presentation, the first way that we're calculating it today doesn't include things like washrooms and hallways and pantries, and that's relative to the building code definition. But changing that gross floor area, we wanted to have relatively the same size that we are permitting today.
So as we increase the size of the dwelling units, we're inviting larger families that will require more parking than just one parking spot. So how are we going to address that going forward?
Ms. Dewsling.
Through you and through the mayor to Councillor Wink again, a very good question. I just want to point out that we're not proposing through the new bylaw just the size, but also a percentage. So that's going to have some effect in terms of the size, the overall size of an ARU, because we have a 50% cap of the original or the primary dwelling. So there is some change there as well. In terms of parking, we are still proposing one parking space per ARU. But again, that is up to council's discretion if you would like to see more. No, I apologize. We can't have more. You could go down, but the province only allows us to have one.
Thank you for clarifying the parking because, you know, in the presentation, it said that the government prescribed one parking spot per unit. So I'll just throw this out there. We're not voting on anything yet today, but I question the need to jump another 20% of the square footage of a unit to 1,000 square feet in the urban area. So we'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions from any other councillors? I'll come over to Councillor Kerr.
Yes, I want to follow up kind of on the thing. This has not been a hidden process. This has been very public for quite a significant period of time, and the suggestion that it was related to a single situation that occurred in the town of Pelham, part of that is that it highlighted what was available at the moment that people really hadn't anticipated as being available and was suddenly put together. The other part was that it happened to be two lots side by side in a particular area, which added another layer of intensification that, again, people hadn't anticipated. Yet, even after that, I personally have received a large number of phone calls and a large number of comments from residents that wanted us and had highly suggested to me that no more than 3, because they realized that provincial policy was 3. You could go higher, and in many cases, many municipalities, after listening to planning and others, that applied for the greater than 3 number of units per area in particular cities and other areas after the intensification are suddenly getting all kinds of blowback themselves. They qualified for federal monies, which seemed like a great thing at the time, but the negative consequences of undertaking that is now turning to bite them rather hard, and finding out that this is really a sad way to create what I call neighborhood discord. One person has commented about getting neighbors to agree to what you're going to build on your own property. I have real challenges with that. I owned actually in a gated community at one time, and I was restricted as to what I could do, what color I could paint, what windows I could use, and everything else, and it was strictly arbitrary. There was no rubric, there was nothing. It was 4 people sitting around a table saying either we liked it or we didn't like it. I'm not a fan of somebody that is going to tell me, if I own a piece of property, what house I can build on my property. That's my property. I own my property. I reserve the right to construct the dwelling provided I meet all the building standards and everything else. Aesthetically, it may not appeal to you personally, but it may be aesthetically appealing to me and my family and maybe many others. So that's a really tough area to get people to agree beside. That means you got to buy off your neighbors to get some things through. Then what happens when the property's sold and the new neighbor dislikes everything? Now what do you do? So it's one of these caveats of you want to be neighborly, you want to be friendly, but I'm the property owner, so I always look at it as I'm the property owner. I should have fundamental rights over what happens on my property and not be at the discretion of everybody around me to tell me what is aesthetically pleasing. I'm very much a fan of the ARUs because I think of the rural areas where an awful lot of agricultural operations wanted to have a place for the parents to retire into, and it was forced into that whole situation of the infamous severing of a 1-acre lot for retirement, and then it got flipped immediately because it turned out to be an expensive piece of property you could sell and buy something cheaper. I don't think that's the case today, that you could turn around and do that. But the whole concept of this, I think, falls into a purvey when we think of affordability and other things, that it also falls into the purvey of granny flats, parental, even children that can't afford their initial dwellings, et cetera, having an opportunity to live somewhere. So it may not be a monetary situation that they're having to pay rent, but it allows them to get a foothold to get started and gain some equity savings that they can go get something on their own. So we're getting mixed into a whole bunch of different things here as to what the ARUs are. I think it's critical that it's brought out that the ARU is a primary dwelling, and what we're looking at is another unit inside that primary dwelling or physically attached to that dwelling, and only one detached ARU. And I hope I'm correct in that interpretation. So it's not as if I'm going to create a little multiplex of separate spots on a spot. It's the theory, the drawings and everything, and I looked at the provincial policy statement where they had it. They showed the wonderful drawing of a house with a basement unit, and then they showed the little garage out the back being converted into a living unit with a white picket fence and all the other things, which I want you to show me that in downtown Toronto anywhere, but that's a whole other ball of wax. So we're trying to find a zone of best fit for everyone, recognizing that increasing the number of units is a positive thing. They don't necessarily have to be rental units. They could be family use units. We all read about the whole situation of our kids can't afford to move out. Well, maybe this is a way to at least give them something that's theirs. But to follow the process, it's still on a single property, so taxation-wise, it's no different than if I put a brand-new addition on my house, it's going to get taxed. Well, I'm of the opinion the ARU would get taxed as well. The adding of the extra parking spots, that's a whole different ball of wax, because that's just in a single-family dwelling, and addition's an addition, but you don't need to have more parking when you get that. This one, yes, there would be a requirement for parking, and we know it's an issue on streets. So we're listening to everything that's coming in. I thought that the comments that came in tonight, I want to say, were really good. I really like the specific stuff of this section, this point, this item. Take a look at it. I think it makes total sense, and that it's good food for thought, and I think our staff are gonna bring back things that reflect it. But at the outset, as I said, I got an awful lot of comments that weren't restricted. And I'm in Fenwick, I'm on Maple Street, and I have people in Cherry Ridge and all around Cherry Ridge and down Church Street and elsewhere making comments to me who had nothing to say about Emmett Street, but they were concerned about what the potential was in their areas. So it was not, to follow up on the CAO, people out there were interested and talked about it, and many went to the meetings. So I think we've done a good job of publicly getting this out.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just one more question for planning. So the consideration that the entire basement could be an ARU. So is there any consideration that that could be divided into 2 ARUs plus then an exterior separate dwelling? Just if you have like a large bungalow, like it would make sense to have 2 in the basement rather than just one big one. So just trying to think what would be the caveat or an exception to that rule. Is there a minimum space that maybe would be available to consider? Then you would have 4 on a property. That's the only thing. So it's just a question to kind of ponder. That's all. No, you don't need to respond. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. So we're into the speakers, and there's no speakers. No, Bill, we're done. Thanks. Thank you. We've, yes. So to wrap up things, again, I think this council has done the transparency on this. We are where we are. We got, now we have a staff report coming. I do want to say that through the meetings we've had, anyone who has followed this from December to the January and to here, staff has had to put up with what I call a very unfair amount of criticism and downright, I'd call it uncivilized behavior at a couple of these public meetings. And I just want to thank staff for putting up with that. Council appreciates the abuse that you took that you shouldn't have had to take. Okay, and this is a very emotional, it's a very emotional situation here, and I can understand that. But if you can't have a civilized dialogue, then it's not a very, it doesn't say much for the society as a whole when it gets into that kind of a realm. So again, staff, thank you for the for pulling all this together, and I'm waiting for the staff report. We'll see that, and of course, again. We'll just have to see if obviously that staff report is going to take in the comments that have been made tonight, and we'll just see what happens, see what the finished product looks like. And I believe, was that March sometime, Ms. Dusling? Do we have a date?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we are intending to bring that back to council March 25th.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, again, we thank everyone for showing up tonight. We thank all those that made presentations. Thank you very much. I now turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If that concludes discussions, I have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink. That committee receive report 2026-0034 for information, and that committee direct planning staff to prepare a recommendation report on this topic for council's consideration. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments, questions? Not seeing any. Call the vote. All those in favor? Seen none opposed, motion carries.
Thank you, and I have a motion put forward by Councillor Kerr that committee receive the town's presentation for information.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a motion moved by Councillor Niznik that committee receive the written correspondence as listed on the agenda, and that committee receive the verbal by the public.
Thank you. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? See none opposed, motion carries.
Splendid. That brings us to adjournment, and I have a motion put forward by Councillor Hildebrand that this special committee of the whole public meeting under the Planning Act be adjourned. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor? I see none opposed. Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned.